Please listen carefully.
So I'm here to talk about food. I can talk about food for literally hours. I've spent years working, listening mostly to migrant farm workers in Colorado and eastern North Carolina, working with small-scale farmers, listening to their tales of struggle and hardship and also opportunity in Colorado, food safety inspections, doing restaurant inspections in Boulder, Colorado, teaching kids and high school kids in Raleigh that food really does come from the ground, and traveling throughout Central America, Guatemala, during the initial negotiations of the free trade agreement, and so the Central American Free Trade Agreement. And so when me and my partner, when we moved to Roanoke in 2013, it just felt so fortuitous that all of these seemingly desperate parts of my life, of my work in food, could come together, and I was able to really delve into the messy and exciting work of recreating a local food system. Let me see if I can do this. Okay. So a lot of times when people think about food, it's kind of in two extremes. One, it's this traditional aerial image shot of a grocery store, that food comes from a box. You know, maybe you do no preparation, or you like heat and serve. And that is a lot of people's reality when it comes to food. The other extreme is that food is magic, which, you know, it totally is, but that it's all butterflies and roses, and everything is just from this other being, this other world. And the reality is that it's yes to both of those and then some. And, you know, I usually mention the word food system, and, you know, immediately everyone's eyes glaze over and they're like, system, who cares about a system? What's this all about? And, you know, the thing about systems is that they're complicated and they're messy, but at the same time, food is so simple. But in most conversations about food, what is left out are what we call market failures. The food system is based on a capitalist system, and in capitalism there are failures and there are market failures. And so some of the really common market failures that we don't really like to talk about are what are the implications of industrial agriculture? Who are the people that are actually toiling in the fields any time of the year, barely making any money? What are the ecological, the economic, the social impacts of industrial agriculture, either on the meat end or large-scale crop production, large-scale vegetable production? And then, you know, kind of on the opposite end, so thinking about industrial agriculture and then also thinking about small-scale farming, you know, what are these stories? How are farmers, small-scale family farmers? 90% of farmers in the United States are family farmers, and some of those are also more on the industrial side. Just because you're a family farmer doesn't mean that you are small-scale. But these are all small-scale farmers, and what are their stories? What side hustles do they have to do? How many markets, how many phone calls are they constantly making to be able to make a go of it, to make farming their profession? Farming is not thought of as a profession in the United States. And so one thing that I've really tried over the years to get a handle on is, what does it mean to be economically viable? It's this word that we kind of throw about in all different situations. And this one farmer, John, you know, farming was his third career. And, you know, the way he defined it, he said, you know, it's having saved up enough money to retire. That's economically viable. In the farming world, that's economically viable, to be able to retire. Because you know what? A lot of times, what your nest egg is your land. And if you sell your land, then you're losing the agriculture. And you're losing that ability to have that land that you've put so much of your life into to even continue. And so if farmers are dirt poor and working all the time, they're probably going to quit farming. And why does that matter? And another farmer, you know, her big point was, you know, every time we lose a farmer, every time land transitions out of agriculture, out of food production, it threatens our food security. It threatens our food security. And we don't really think about food production and food security in the same world. And so just to talk about production and consumption, the U.S. is great at agriculture. We produce tons of food. We are we are the world's largest exporter of food. Our food in the United States makes up 9% of the export market. And our big crops, if you've ever flown in the Midwest, this is a site that kind of looks like aliens, but it's actually agriculture. Our big crops are corn, which is mostly for animal feed, cattle meat, dairy, cow milk, poultry meat, and then soybeans. And then if you're talking about crop production, corn, soybeans, wheat, alfalfa, and cotton. So these are all what are called commodity crops. And these aren't really the crops that we know we should probably be eating, but the big crops also affect the policies, and the policies affect the big crops, both at a state level, at a national level, and at an international level. And what does all that mean for us? In a state level, on a community level, how does all that tie together in this complicated but simple system? In Virginia, agriculture is the top industry. It is $52 billion a year is the annual output for the agriculture industry. And you look at these charts and these numbers, and it's great, but one thing I really want you guys to draw attention to is that in Virginia, less than 3% of all food produced in Virginia is fruits, vegetables, and nuts. Less than 3%. And yet, in our heads, in nutrition, we know that a diet rich in fruits and vegetables is good for us. But that isn't our priority. That isn't our priority as a nation. That isn't our priority as a state. And then we try and have that priority in our communities, and it's a mismatch. It's a market failure. And what can we do about it? And so to just localize it a little bit more and look at it more in terms of opportunities as opposed to problems, with LEAP, what we're trying to do, our mission is to nourish community, nourish healthy communities, and build resilient local food systems. And it's not something that's an individual person. It's all the people in the community, all the people in the system that have to come together to make these value-based decisions, to look at strategic infrastructure problems, to think regionally, and to really address these problems head on. And so, there's a lot of talk about data, and there's so much amazing data. Liz Ackley, these are actually her maps. She's speaking tomorrow. But there's a lot of data just in Roanoke that says we got inequality. There's terrible things happening. But really, I want to look at this as there's some really big screaming things saying that resources are not being equitably distributed, and that impacts health. That impacts what our opportunities are. And so, overweight kids who are overweight and kids who are underweight, they're concentrated in those same zones that were redlined earlier, northwest and southeast. Looking at it a different way, looking in terms of resources. This is a map of the city of Roanoke. And those little pins, those are where the grocery stores are, where the full-service grocery stores are. And in the middle of the city, you can see that there's absolutely nothing. And so if people who live in the city don't have, they're also, the areas of concentrated poverty. If they don't have access to grocery stores, then they're not likely to buy it. And also produce, because it's a specialty crop. Fruits and vegetables in the United States agriculture lingo fall into the specialty crop category. It's a specialty crop. It's hard to handle. It's a lot of risk. It's high labor. It makes it so that it's also not as affordable and also not as available, especially in low-income, low-access neighborhoods. And so Roanoke City has 23 census tracts. 9 of them are low-income, low-access. Sometimes you hear them called food deserts, which is the map on the right. If you add personal vehicle access, that number jumps to 16 out of 23 census tracts in the city that are low-income, low-access. And the map on the left, that's high-poverty areas. The darker the area, the higher the poverty. And so if you think back to the other map, you see the same lack of access, lack of resources, and also health needs overlapping. And so instead of saying, man, this is terrible, the world's going to end, we have to say, okay, what are opportunities? What are things that we can do? What is something that LEAP, as a small organization, trying to support farmers and trying to really nourish healthy communities, what can we do to address it? And what does the community actually want? And so one thing that the community members really said is, we want fruits and vegetables. We want a farmer's market. But from the farmer's perspective, it doesn't make sense for farmers to go into a neighborhood or try and set up 10 different farmers markets every week, because they actually have to farm. farm. And so what LEAP did is we started a mobile farmers market. And there are a lot of mobile farmers markets out there, use best practices, figure out what works, what doesn't work. And so we started in 2015. Our stops are all these little green dots on the maps. And so we have 10 stops. So in 2017, we started with 5 in 2015. This year, we're on track to have moved over wholesale value, $100,000 worth of local produce. And so it's not chump change, but it also shows that there's a lot of opportunity to grow. So what we're able to do is we're able to provide a market opportunity, a wholesale market opportunity for local farmers. We only purchase from within a 100-mile radius of Roanoke. And we're also able to provide access to people who want it and are asking for it. And we're able to provide equitable access because we have incentive programs to make it so that the food is not only available, but also people can afford it. And so, seniors, they are lining up waiting for us every single Tuesday for us to get there. We accept SNAP, we double SNAP, and that's not something that's done on our own, but we're working regionally and statewide to make this a policy change, a policy shift, that money is going towards farmers. And going towards supporting healthy food as opposed to food budgets, limited food budgets on SNAP being spent on low nutrient but cheap food that is from all of the commodity production that we support in the US. And I just want to kind of show this great truck. We had a broken down old church bus that we used for the first 2 years. And, you got to start somewhere. And last year, we purchased a vehicle, and Audrey Langford Barnes, who was a speaker last year at Expo, we were chatting. She was like, oh, I have students at James Madison Industrial Design. We can totally retrofit it. And they did, and it was awesome, and it was beautiful. And we are significantly happier with a new vehicle. And I just want to end kind of with this, one of my favorite quotes from my work with farmers in Colorado is that this young aspiring farmer, she wanted to farm, she was trying to do this, she was trying to figure out how to do it. And she said, gosh, I don't know. How do you make it work? How do you get enough money to afford the land? How do you make payments on that land? This is where I'm struggling. A lot of people are like, you just need to get a rich boyfriend. And it's very decidedly not a feminist position. So don't think about it as, oh, this is the reality that we have to choose. It's up to us to address these market failures. It's up to us to function as a community, to serve the community. And maybe it's just one veggie at a time. Thank you.